As we are continuing on here with the show, who can forget classic wrestling? Who still remembers Pampero Firpo? And I understand you recently received some classic wrestling that you've been really excited to talk about with the listeners. It sounds delightful. Is that a pig?
It's a truffle pig.
What I'm trying to say here, I think, is that you have an email that you're very excited about.
No, I don't. You see, you're wrong already. You've screwed the pooch here. You've shit the bed on this already. It's not an email. I got a package in the United States Postal Service the way that Benjamin Franklin intended it to be.
Well, you picked up the pooch. I only held its head.
Well, there you see. I'm the one that's got to do all the work around here. But our old friend Joni Aries from up in the Pacific Northwest, every once in a while, she said, besides cakes, she sends me a package of old wrestling pictures or programs or things pertinent to the Northwest out there where she's been a fan for years and years and years and been a photographer and done a bunch of stuff. And in this package was just a program from Portland Wrestling. Everybody knows, if you're listening to this program, you probably know that Don Owens was the promoter of Portland Wrestling, and that was pretty much, along with the Houston television program, the longest running wrestling program on the air in the United States, at least, from what, they got up to 40 years, or was it 41?
I'm not exactly sure.
Maybe 39. I can't remember.
Houston was on Channel 39.
Well, yeah, and they did a 39 on 39 celebration one year. That's how I know they got to at least 39. But anyway, this is Portland, and the program contains a calendar of the events that the Portland Wrestling Promotion ran for June 1987. Now, this is a few years past the glory days with Piper and Buddy Rose and the Sheepherders and all that stuff, and business had started to go down for most of the territories, but Portland really didn't constrict that much because Portland was always a small territory. And she even included a map. I don't even know if you know this, Brian, but the Portland wrestling territory as it existed, at least in the 80s, not only is Oregon one of the smaller states in the United States, except for a few like Delaware in the Northeast, but Portland, as a city, sits on the uppermost northern part of the state of Oregon, and they also ran towns like Medford and Klamath Falls, Oregon, in the very southernmost part. That's only 280 miles. So north to south, the state of Oregon is only 300 miles long. And
it was considered a relatively easy travel territory, but also a party territory.
Well, yes, and that was part of it. It was explained to me, and I met a young lady in 1985 in Dallas that had come down to visit from Portland. And boy, howdy, that made me want to go to Portland. The only time I ever wanted to work in Portland. But it was a short trip territory, and it rained all the time, so indoor activities were more suitable. But also because the southeastern part of the state has almost no towns in it, they really didn't run most of that part of the state. And Portland over to Pendleton, Oregon, or up to Klamath, or not Klamath Falls, but Yakima, Washington, is only like 200 miles. So we're talking about a schedule for a month in a territory that was basically 300 miles north to south and 200 miles east to west at its widest point. And these are the live wrestling events that you could see just in that small geographic area. And then figure, well, there was another territory in almost every part of the United States running just as many shows. And that's a thing I wanted to illustrate. Because now the business has completely inverted to where television in the territory days was the vehicle that got you familiar with the talent that was in the area. You knew who was mad at who and why, and who was challenging for what title, and it introduced you to the new wrestlers that came in the territory. and it kept you up on the big stars that were already there. That was what your 1 hour or 90 minutes, or in a few places, 2 hours of television a week would tell you. But to see the good stuff, you had to go live. You had to go to the arena to see the big matches, the major matches, the non-televised stuff. And the only time they would televise that is if they were shooting an angle or having a match with a finish that they should show on television, because it would lead you to want to buy a ticket to see the live rematch the next week or the next month that was not going to be on TV. And that's the way it worked. And the guys made their money on the tickets that were sold at the gate for the shows, to the point where, I don't know if this point has been made, Brian, enough lately for the younger fans. You didn't get paid for television in the territory days. Very few people did. Have we even brought that up lately?
Not in a long time, no.
If you were a pushed main event full-time roster talent, or even an underneath full-time roster talent in the territories, television was looked at by the promoters as your advertising. And they paid the job guys $25, $50, $60 someplace. But the top guys, even Flair didn't get paid to go to the TBS studio on Techwood Drive every Saturday morning and cut those promos, or even when he wrestled. That was just what you did. Crockett would pay guys on his syndicated TV tapings if they were in the dark matches that were advertised, because they drew the money, and so would Vince, so would a few of the other bigger promoters. But in Memphis TV, nobody got paid except the job guys. And the announcers got paid. But that was the thing. Television was of that importance to as your sales vehicle, but the product was the house shows. And now it's completely reversed to where the house shows are really just, oh boy, we haven't been to New York this year. We haven't been over to Chicago or whatever. Let's drop in. But the house shows are just kind of touring. The guys don't work as hard. TV's the big thing, the major rights fees. It's completely reversed itself. But because of that, as we mentioned so many times, there's no place for guys to get experience. The place to get experience is not on national television or on worldwide pay-per-view. And the territories gave guys, even the big towns in a territory, you didn't want to shit the bed in front of 15,000 people at a major show in the Omni, but it's a whole lot better than shitting the bed in front of 1 million on television. But there were also small spot shows that's where you went and learned. You got more time. They gave the matches more time because there were fewer of them. You had to fill up 2 hours. And you could fuck with individual fans in the crowd and see what worked and what didn't. And so this schedule that we're going to finally get to here in 1 second illustrates if you were a guy on top in a small territory, even though, as I said, this was past the glory days, you could work enough and make enough money to where you could live and be home every night and keep in shape for an opportunity that might come with Vince or Vern or whoever the fuck, right? For more money, Crockett. And if you were a rookie or a guy that, just hadn't made it yet, you could go and you could try out a new gimmick, or you could just get experience or work with different people until hopefully a light bulb came on or you got a spot, right? That was the purpose. That was the benefit to the wrestlers of the territory system, and to the promoters. Obviously, it was because they didn't just run 1 or 2 towns a week and expect to do big crowds at each one. They ran their towns regularly and developed markets where they could sell 150,000, 250,000 tickets every year in that town at affordable prices, and their business would maintain itself on an ongoing basis. Nobody was going to goddamn be a billionaire, but everybody was going to make good, decent money. So having said that, Brian, Are you ready to hear if you were a wrestler in Portland wrestling in June of 1987, where you would have been booked?
Yeah.
June 1st, Cottage Grove, Oregon, at the high school. That was a Monday night. It's a spot show. Tuesday night, Roseburg, Oregon, at the fairgrounds. And all these bell times, by the way, are 8 p.m. Roseburg, Oregon looks to be somewhere around 200 miles from Portland, tops. Wednesday night was Medford, Oregon. And again, Medford is a town that's almost all the way south, probably about 280 miles, right next to Klamath Falls. Salem, Oregon on Thursday the 4th. Salem is, it looks like it's 50 miles on this map I'm looking at from Portland. So these guys are going down and they're driving back home every night. There's no hotels. Nobody's having to rent a car. Friday nights, and there were 4 Fridays. Actually, I should mention Thursday night was Salem, Oregon every week. There were 4 Thursdays in June, and they ran Salem each night. So that was 4. So if they're drawing, June 87, I don't know what their business was like, but if they're doing 500 people every Thursday night at the Armory, they're still selling 2,000 tickets a month or 25,000 tickets a year in Salem, Oregon on Thursday nights. And then Friday night, weekly, there were 4 Fridays in June, was Eugene, Oregon, which looks to me to be about 125, 130 miles from Portland. And then, of course, Saturday night was the Portland Sports Arena. That was everybody's money night, the biggest town. Owens had his own building, the Portland Sports Arena, that he had converted from this massive bowling alley. And that's where they did their TV, and that's where you saw them doing all those angles in the crow's nest from all those classic Portland tapes. That was every Saturday night, the 6th, the 13th, 20th, and 27th. But then Sunday, the 7th, Mabton, Washington, which is almost not on the map, but it's in between Yakima and Prosser. They were at the high school spot show. And then another town named M-Freewater in Oregon at the Posse Grounds, not the Pussy Grounds, but the Posse Grounds.
No one thought about the Pussy Grounds. Why'd you have to bring that up?
Okay, well, you mentioned the people, the reasons to go to Portland wrestling.
I mentioned that?
You did. June 9th was Albany, Oregon at the Boys and Girls Club. June 10th was Hood River, Oregon at the Armory. We're back in Salem on Thursday, Eugene on Friday, Portland on Saturday. On Sunday, the 14th of June, they're in Warm Springs, Oregon at the Convention Center. On the 15th, they're in Prineville, Oregon at the fairgrounds. On the 16th, they're in Klamath Falls, Oregon, which is a long trip, at the OIT Gym. They're back in Medford on Wednesday the 17th, which apparently runs every 2 weeks on a Wednesday night. Salem Thursday, Eugene Friday, Portland Saturday. Sunday the 21st, they're in Pendleton, Oregon. Monday the 22nd, Yakima, Washington, which again was only 185 miles from Portland. 23rd and 24th, Tuesday and Wednesday, because I guess they had a printing deadline, were to be announced, time 8 p.m. They were still filling the calendar in, but they were going to run every goddamn night. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, they're back in Salem, Eugene, Portland. Then Sunday, the 28th, Seaside, Oregon at the Convention Center. The 29th, McMinnville, Oregon at the Armory. I swear to God, McMinnville can't be 25 miles from Portland. And then on the 30th, they were in Lapine, Oregon at the high school. 30 days in the month, 30 live events in the probably at that time smallest geographic territory in the United States. But everybody was getting some practice. And that was magnified 20 times over, except when you went to the in 1987, how many shows a night was the WWF running? 3?
3 or 4. Because they even had a D show. I mean, they had 4 shows running a night at different points.
Yeah. Crockett was running 2 shows a night most nights, and I think the UWF might have still been in business, practicing at that point, right before he bought them. There was still a Florida circuit, even though Crockett had assumed it. World Class was still around. Memphis was running 6 or 7 days a week. Well, the AWA, Vern was still running approximately the same schedule that he always did by 87. He was just starting to cut back. But this is late in the territory days, and we're still talking about, in the United States alone, probably 20 to 25 live events running every single night. And that was when the territories were hampered.
You know what I'd be curious about? Because I don't know, I always find this area fascinating, but I can't pretend to be an expert in Portland wrestling. There are many great ones out there, like Mike Rogers. But the next year...
Frank Culbertson,
of course. Kirby Strong, I think is his name, right? Is that his name, the guy out there? Kirby something.
He had to change it. Something about the way he was registered for his parole.
But I'd like to know about the next year, when Billy Jack Haynes ran Opposition. He came off the road from WWE and ran against Don Owens. I wonder how many days a week they were running. Were they still running 30 days a month at that point?
I think everybody was slowing down at that point because I think it was, well, it may have been around that time, or it may have been the early 90s. Memphis stopped even running Evansville. I think they had a TV issue or whatever, but it started slowing down in 88 and onwards. But I thought, well, that was an interesting look at the schedule of a small territory, just in terms of what the live events were that they ran.